This is my video diary charting my journey through advancing progressive MS and right to die in Switzerland. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to speak about tonight. There's so many things that I want to think about and express before I make my final exit and utilize this right abroad. Today, and I know that there are people with these illnesses that are probably experiencing very similar situations. I was in the grocery store with my caregiver, and we were going in the grocery aisles, and I became totally lost and didn't know where I was. Didn't know what exactly we were trying to put together for recipes, and was having problems cognitively and visually integrating all the bright lights and the different products and the organization of the store that I've been through so many times. And it was really, really demoralizing. And these kinds of things keep happening to a greater degree as the illness advances. Simple things like going to the grocery store and shopping for a soup are huge, challenging tasks, even with a helper. As I mentioned before in my other video diaries, oftentimes I have to decide 2 of 5 things that I can do in any given day because I don't have enough cognitive and physical capacity to complete or execute many things that the normal person wouldn't even think twice about. So if I go to the grocery store and cook a soup and get dressed and walk the dog with the roller, that is a huge effort, and then usually the whole next day I can't do anything. So this idea of like energy conservation with progressive MS is a huge factor. I actually have things placed around my house, little stools and chairs that strategically, so that if I get tired walking from one room to another and I'm in the middle of something and my body freezes and I can't send the command from my brain to my arms and legs to move, that I have like a little stool positioned so that I can collapse literally. And this is just, it has become a way of life, really, how to do this energy conservation. And I was telling my therapist today on the phone that it actually at some point becomes a little bit of a nervous breakdown, because what you have worked out in terms of energy conservation will drop month to month as the illness progresses. So if you felt like you could do some activity using your upper arms, maybe that would be to an even lesser degree the following month or the following 2 to 3 months. So something like 2 years, as they said at Rocky Mountain MS Clinic, is a long time, and with a disease like this, a huge time in terms of function. So what is it like being inside something like this? Well, you don't really know who you are or what you are, because everything you identified with for so many years in terms of abilities is lost, and the baseline keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. And I know, in the context of right to die and fatal, not fatal illness, people may not understand how these neurodegenerative illnesses work unless they've really been closely acquainted with them. in that when you get to the phase where you can't move at all and you are totally in the bed, you can exist in that state for several years before the body shuts down and you die of secondary causes. So now I'm in this phase of getting more advanced, losing more abilities, and being able to do less. And what was really a horrifying condition last year is actually something that I wish for now, because I had more abilities then. I could, do things that I can't do now a year ago. So you're always wishing for what you had before in this progressive illness. So in all of this, I have tried to figure out ways to keep my sanity, because it's a terrifying situation, having been so physically active and intellectually learned and capable, to lose your control of your body and to become more and more cognitively impaired. And one thing that I've really tried to focus on to just kind of keep my sanity is understanding that we are not the body and we are not the mind. And these things that I identified as me, the filmmaking, the physical activities like dance and yoga, all the things that I excelled in, that made me happy, that those weren't me in the sense of our true self spiritually. They were me in terms of this ego and this life, but not who we truly are. And I'm really starting to understand that the more degenerated I become. And I even asked a chaplain who's going to come and visit me about if I could go to hospice with her and sit with the people that are definitely terminal, prognosis in the next several months, because I think that they must have a very precious perspective, because they don't have a choice, right? My illness can go on a little longer before I would be forced to naturally expire. But these people, say with terminal brain cancer, are in hospice and they don't have a choice. They have to accept that their life is going to come to an end quite soon. And I imagine that going through the stages of grief and all the things that we have to face in the dying process, they would come closer to that spiritual reality that is who we ultimately are. And I'm trying to, even though I am not in that terminal phase yet, in this degenerative illness, I'm trying to really focus on who it is that is me, because I'm losing a piece of me as the months go by. I'm losing more of my arm or leg function or my cognitive computational abilities, and certainly I've lost my career and many of my abilities to do what I used to do. So it is like I am being erased bit by bit. But then what remains in the ashes is the true essence of who we all really are. And I listen to a lot of spiritual authors, and there's this guy, James Von Prague. He's kind of a funny little guy, but I really like his presentation, and I think he is very sincere. And he talks about how this is a school, and that this life and this three-dimensional reality is a school that we are learning, and that we aren't really from here. We're from somewhere else. And that when we have finished up this schooling, the soul leaves the body and it returns to where it came from, our home, our spiritual home. And that's where I'll be going to, and that's where will be going to. The conditions of my death, progressive MS, voluntary euthanasia, maybe the details don't really matter, because what I'm having to understand and come to terms with is something that those terminal people in hospice have already figured out by now and know, and that many of us who, even if we aren't sick and we are understanding the idea of practicing dying and learning to practice how to die, I think that's what one Hindu said, is actually really beautiful, because it gives our life even more quality. So who is me? What is that energy, and where will it go to? And not knowing where it will go to is not actually a scary thing. It's kind of exciting. It's sort of like I'm preparing for a long trip. And I've even heard from this same chaplain who goes to hospice that people who are about to die will start talking as if they're going on a long trip. And sometimes they will start seeing and talking to people that have passed and are on the other side, and it's with such clarity that you wonder if that person is actually in the room spiritually. Another thing that's been happening to me, I mentioned it in a previous video diary, is as the paralysis advances and I become more entombed by this illness, there is a freedom that this spiritual energy is releasing and feeling that is really profound. And at first I thought, listening to all these near-death experiences and kind of thinking about the near-death experience culture, that it was kind of this beautiful fantasy story. And now I'm really realizing that this is real, that where I go at nighttime when I leave my body is actually not just the machinations of my mind or firings of my brain while I'm sleeping, that I may in fact actually be traveling. And as I became more paralyzed and ill with MS, this leaving my body and then returning in the morning became more of a profound trip every night. And I would go to these like incredible cities where the buildings were so high and the lights were so bright, and there were these incredible light bodies flying all over, and I was moving at this rocket speed, and I was moving and accomplishing so much. And then I remember the moment of waking up and having my caregiver, wake me up with my pain medicine, and the feeling of that energy shooting back into my body and not wanting to go back into the paralysis, and how scary that was. So I'm just thinking more and more about this and identifying with the true self, the true me. And it is really, really far out stuff. So this is my video diary tonight. Thank you.